Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the August 14, 2012 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda for tonight's discussion on both sides of the room. If you haven't already done so and would like to pick up a copy of the agenda and follow along with our proceedings tonight, I would invite you to do so. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, including a segment known as Questions and Comments of a General Nature, where if you have comments or questions with respect to items that are not on our agenda tonight, we would welcome you to come down and tell us what's on your mind. But before that, it is customary for us to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point in time, I would like to ask everyone to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Terrific. Thank you. And with that, I would like to ask our fine village clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Redkin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Newstadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin? Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner Schnell?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much, April. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set of prior minutes to approve tonight, and those are the minutes from our regular council meeting on August 7, 2012. Are there any comments, corrections, or changes from any members of the council? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Those minutes are approved. As promised, that brings us to item 4 on our agenda, the segment for public comments. If there are any public comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not appearing on our agenda tonight, the protocol is to please come down to the podium, give us your name and address, and we would welcome hearing from you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully and Commissioners. Michael Casa, President of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, 2001 Butterfield Road, Suite 120 in Downers Grove. As you know, the important priority of the Economic Development Corporation is for the retention and attraction of business, but there's also another goal that the EDC has. As you know, we also manage the Downers Grove Visitors Bureau, and for some time now I've been looking for opportunities to enhance the effectiveness of the Bureau, and specifically to find ways for us to work closer with the stakeholders in Downers Grove that are involved in the process or gain benefit from visitors to our community. And I'm happy to report that we've now held 2 meetings of the new Downers Grove Visitors Bureau Committee. And that committee includes hotels here in Downers Grove. It includes representatives of the Tivoli, Good Samaritan, the Park District, Downtown Management, the Downers Grove Chamber, and of course the Village, represented by Mike Baker, your Deputy Manager. The main purpose of the committee, that's true of, I guess, of any committee, is to look for ways for us to enhance our work and take advantage of new opportunities to attract visitors to Downers Grove with an emphasis on overnight stays. We covered a wide range of topics at our meetings, but probably the most important thing is to allow us to engage all of these stakeholders and allow us to find ways to work together to generate ideas and to put those ideas into practice, again, in order to enhance our ability to promote Downers as a destination for visitors. Non-residents, visitors, play an important role in our local economy, in any local economy. They shop in our stores, eat in our restaurants, stay in our hotels, attend our events. And one of the things we're going to do is to try to develop at some point the economic impact of visitors to this community. And I think when we report on that down the road, the results, I think, will be pretty surprising, maybe even it'll be good news, but perhaps very surprising to some folks who may not realize the important role that a non-resident plays in our economy. So we'll continue to update you, and I wanted you to know that we've gathered all the stakeholders together. We're going to meet on a regular basis and do all we can to ensure that important component of our local economy remains strong. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casa. We'll look forward to that and appreciate the efforts, and hopefully they will provide the return on investment that we would like to see. And on that note, I know one of the challenges that we've often had over the years with respect to tourism or events of any type is truly measuring what the economic impact is from them. And I know that there are some challenges with respect to measuring that. It's not a simple mechanical calculation, but I also know that there are some pretty sophisticated models that can be used to nevertheless come up with reliable measurements for what the benefits are. And I think that that is going to be particularly critical to this council, as it should be, if we're going to make any investments in tourism and attracting people from out of town, whether it's us ourselves or in partnership with someone else, knowing how to measure what the return on that investment is going to be critical. So we'll look forward to that.
The state and the county and the region do publish information on the economic impact of tourism. Harder to do at the municipal level, but we're going to take that data as well as data from each individual industry. It's easy for the hotels to track it because virtually every person who stays in a hotel is a visitor per se. Retailers, restaurants oftentimes are able to track their customer base by zip code. And certainly the Park District and the Tivoli and other stakeholders to sort of measure their sales, especially those that really appeal to a non-resident. So while you are correct, Mr. Mayor, it's difficult to do, but I think it's an important one, and I think we can come up with a pretty good snapshot when we provide that data to you.
Well, that'd be appreciated. And as you mentioned, part of it depends on the availability of in-store data from merchants, and secondarily, their willingness to share that information, because they may have the information, but if they don't share it, then you don't have it to use to make these sort of calculations or comparisons to metrics. So if there's that sounds like an opportunity to partner with the business community for a mutual benefit.
And for some merchants, it will come as a pleasant surprise to them if we can determine what, or demonstrate to them what a large percentage of their customer base are visitors. And perhaps everyone will gain a greater appreciation for that, again, important segment of our economy.
Good point. Any other questions from members of the council for Mr. Casa?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very much appreciated. Any other questions or comments of a general nature from any members of the audience? Questions or comments with respect to items that are not appearing on tonight's agenda? Very well. Hearing none, that brings us to item 5, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight. Be surprised if we did. So we'll move right along to item 6, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to the consent agenda? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council with respect to the consent agenda? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 7, our active agenda. We have one item on our active agenda, and that is item 7A. Do I have a motion to authorize an extension of a final plan development amendment for plan development number 31? And everybody knows what plan development 31 is, right?
Sure. Oh, so
Do I have such a motion?
yes, we do, and we'll find out what it is. I move to adopt an ordinance authorizing an extension of the final plan development amendment for plan development number 31 for additions to the existing parking garage and the construction of a new 6-level parking garage at 3500 Lacey Road as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments on that item from any members of the audience? Any questions or comments from any members of the village council? And thank you for telling us what plan development
Well,
31
it was
is.
in the motions. We
Roll
have
call,
to
please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously. It brings us to the end of our active agenda and right into our first reading, item 8. This is where we consider items for discussion purposes only, for action at a later point in time. And we have a number of items on our first reading agenda tonight, which is always nice to see. And that the custom is to turn the meeting over at this point in time to our village manager for presentment of these items. Mr. Fieldman.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. There are actually 6 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an ordinance creating and adopting a stormwater utility. Now, the council's been working on this for months and actually years, as you will hear in a few moments. And the council last saw this in April. And since that time, the village staff has been very busy creating the program consistent with your policy direction. many different departments working together, and that interdepartmental team has been led by Stan Balicki, our Assistant Director of Public Works. So I've asked Stan to present the information regarding the stormwater utility ordinance. Stan.
Very good, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Balicki.
Good evening. Thank you, Dave. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Dave mentioned, we're here tonight to discuss and consider an ordinance that would implement the stormwater utility for the village. And really, this ordinance that's before you for discussion is the result of the policy direction that was provided to staff in April. And at that point, that policy direction was really part of a multi-step, and as Dave said, in fact, a multi-year effort to get it to that point. And the details that you'll see before you here as we go through the presentation are consistent with that direction that was provided back in April. There's been a large amount of detailed information that's also been generated and provided as part of the agenda item this evening. The credit and incentive manual is attached as part of the presentation, the ordinance obviously. There's a number of FAQs that I think were generated throughout the process that there are questions and answers for throughout as well. We'll also talk a little bit about the extensive public engagement effort that we plan to launch beginning in September that will go through the program launch in January and beyond that. So just a brief overview, a little refresher. The village owns and operates a stormwater management system, which often unseen. Most of it's below ground, but yet it's a key piece of the infrastructure that the village owns and maintains. Historically, the village has used property tax revenue and continues to use property tax revenue to fund the maintenance and repair of the stormwater system. Adoption of the proposed ordinance and creation of the stormwater utility would shift the village from a property tax-based system to the fee-based system entirely for the operation and maintenance of this system. And under the utility, there's a few bullet points that we've identified that we feel are important to discuss. First of all properties benefit from the stormwater system that the village maintains, and under the stormwater utility, all properties therefore pay to maintain it. The utility encourages on-site stormwater management. It also provides a predictable and dedicated funding source for the maintenance of the system, and under this scenario is also coupled with a property tax reduction by the village. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. The monthly stormwater fees, again, these are consistent with what was last shown and the direction that was provided back in April. That would be assessed beginning in January of 2013. There's a three-tier system for single-family residential, ranging from $6.30 per month up to $12.60 per month. And then for all non-single-family residentials, you can see in the last table, would be $8.40. It would be multiples of that based on the ERUs that are on a particular piece of property. Vacant parcels, you can see the note would be charged 3/10 of an ERU, or $2.52 per month. Under the stormwater utility, there is an opportunity for fees to be reduced. There are two ways for this to happen. There are credits, which a credit is an ongoing fee reduction for on-site actions and facilities that reduce stormwater runoff to a property. And then there are incentives that are created as well, which is a one-time fee reduction for qualifying facilities. And as I mentioned previously, the stormwater utility would be coupled with a village reduction in 2013 of the property tax levy by approximately 19% or $2.48 million. The stormwater utility was recommended in the long-range financial plan. It also furthers several of the village's strategic plan goals, including steward of financial and environmental sustainability, exceptional municipal services, top quality infrastructure, and continual innovation. So I mentioned earlier that this was really a multi-year effort to get to this step. We'll talk a little bit about how we got here, as well as what we've done since April, the progress that has been made, as well as what the plans are from here forward. Beginning in 2003, the village established the Stormwater Utility Exploratory Committee, which looked at the concept of the utility, as well as identified the need for a maintenance plan to look at the overall maintenance of the village's stormwater system and really what action should be taken to properly care for that. The Watershed Infrastructure Improvement Plan in 2007 followed up on that with an emphasis on infrastructure improvements and addressing areas where there were drainage problems and deficiencies to be addressed. The Long-Range Financial Plan identified the stormwater utility in 2010, and then again in 2011, we got into more detail with the stormwater utility study itself, which looked at the overall possibility of the utility and how specifically it might work, and then we're here in 2012 with the final report and the council authorization to proceed. Prior to the council authorization to proceed back in April, there was a process that involved a lead up to that of 7 village council meetings. There were a number of informational videos that the village produced and posted on village website, as well as making them available on YouTube. There were meetings with stakeholders to discuss the potential for the utility. There were public meetings that were held in January of last year. There were email questions and comments down to specific impacts on particular parcels where people could email and get information on what the potential impact would be on their address. The village posted the questions that were received and comments, as well as any information replies that were provided. And again, I mentioned the specific information or impact that potentially would be seen to each parcel. So what's happened since April? As Dave mentioned, there's a lot that's happened at the staff level since April. The detailed information that you see before you tonight was prepared and has been provided. The billing system, which was really the initial focus of our efforts after April, has been created, and along with that, the billing database and our GIS system have been updated as well. The ordinance that you have before you has been drafted. The credit and incentive manual has been prepared. The program administration finalized, and the public engagement plan has also been prepared. So the next question is, where do we go from here? The village plans an extensive public engagement effort from September through to the program launch and beyond. And there are 3 really main, I think, items that plan is seeking to address. Number 1 is to create awareness of the utility prior to anyone receiving a bill. Secondly is to let people know, understand the financial impacts that they will be facing on their bill, and also give them the tools to know how to lower their bill as well. We have a number of different medium at our disposal to get that word out and to conduct the public engagement effort. Everything from social media, Facebook, Twitter, and so on, to the village website, e-news, Channel 6, the Hometown Times, the community-wide notification system, direct mailings, meetings with key customers, displays at public buildings, and interactive emails. And then certainly last but not least would be the 2013 budget review and approval that includes the budget for the stormwater fund along with the reduction in the village's portion of the property tax levy. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And why don't we start with questions? We're going to flip it. We'll start with questions from the village council on what's been presented, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for any questions, and then we can come back to the council as necessary. Any questions or comments from any members of the village council? Commissioner Neustadt?
Just because it was one of the last things we saw, what is an interactive email? What's the plan for those?
I think the interactive emails is what we refer to in terms of when people can email with their address and ask what the financial impacts are going to be in terms of the property tax reduction coupled with the stormwater fee.
So they can basically budget for the next year's expenses for the stormwater utility and their discounted amount in their property tax levy.
And we're getting, we get those already, and we'll continue to get those.
I think we advertised those at a coffee with the council not too long ago, so that's probably where they're coming from. In general, since I'm already on a roll here, I think this is, just the next step in something that the policy has already been discussed at length. We have obviously had a lot of meetings up here on this issue, otherwise we wouldn't even be where we are today. I think from my perspective, the stormwater utility is in line with our long-range financial plan, and that it gives us a dedicated revenue source for funding our infrastructure needs and systems. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this from my colleagues, but also from staff, and there's going to be a lot more work. One of the questions from one of the commissioners was, what type of staff time and positions are needed. There's going to be a bunch of part-time positions and a full-time stormwater manager that's going to be added to not only administer the system, but to help and make sure that when bills go out and when there's questions and interactive emails are coming back and forth, we're able to answer them and provide the level of service that our residents have come to know from the village. So I really appreciate all the work and look forward to hearing my council colleagues' comments, but I will be in support of this ordinance as we vote on it in the next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
Well, I had numerous questions, but Dave and staff addressed them all, so thank you for that. I don't know if this is appropriate now, but I still have an issue with, I would like to have unlimited incentives in the first year. I think it's good customer service, so just put that out there for my colleagues to hear. I think most of you may know that already. But that's all.
And I think the best time to address how we handled the first year's incentives would really be at the 2013 budget time. That's when staff will put out an allotment for a total amount of incentives in year one, and then the council would be free to adjust it up or down to allow a variety of number of people to apply for incentives in the first year. So we will have those numbers ready for your consideration at the end of September.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Waldeck?
Well, actually, I had no questions. When this came to a vote several months ago, I was the lone vote against it. And if anybody wants to know why, you can go back in the record and get all the explanations. I'll save a full explanation for the final vote. But as to whether what staff has presented is what council conceived, I totally agree that what council voted on, I think that's, I think staff did a good job in presenting what council envisioned, although I do have problems with switching it from the tax-based system, and we can cover that another time, but I have no additional questions, and as Stan, I think staff did a good job in presenting what council asked for. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Schnell?
First of all, I want to compliment staff. You did a tremendous amount of work in a very short period of time to get this going to be implemented in 2013. I think everyone that was on the team should be complimented. In particular, the Stormwater Credit and Incentive Manual is probably one of the better manuals I've read over the years that I've been up here. Very clear, lots of information. If anybody wants to find out if they could apply for a credit or an incentive, I would suggest you read it. It's everything and anything is probably outlined in there in a very clear and concise way. So I don't know who wrote it, but whoever did should be complimented because it really is a fine fine manual that can actually be read by someone who doesn't have engineering experience. So it's just, it's easily understood. I like things like that. So great job. I do have a couple of questions about the public engagement process that's going to start in September, that goes through January and February. If someone wants to know where their parcel fits in all of this, during that public engagement period, they can contact staff, or there'll be a way that they can contact staff to find out if their residential property or whatever is a Tier 1 or Tier 2 and Tier 3. And if they have questions about why it falls into a certain thing, there's a way to get answers to those questions during that period? Is that the intention of the?
Yes, that is the interactive email
Okay.
portion. And of course, we're not limited only to email. There are a variety of ways to contact the village. We'll put some phone numbers of our stormwater team on the website as well. So basically, any question you have between now and when we start, we will answer, try to get as much information to any and every resident and business owner in town.
I think people are going to be confused with this Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, 1, 2, and 3, simply because I think most people view the square footage of their house as where it should fall, and that isn't necessarily the case.
Correct.
So, and how are you going to get that information out so that people feel comfortable contacting staff and finding, getting their questions answered? Are we going to have public meetings, or is it only going to be done through the internet or through phone calls, or exactly what is the process that you envision?
Well, we have a pretty detailed process laid out that's been led by our communications director, Doug Kozlowski,
Okay.
sitting next to me. The key components of the communication strategy are outlined on the screen here, and it's really sort of every tool we have: social media, internet, e-news, all the digital era things. We also know that not everybody likes to communicate that way, so we'll use direct mailings.
Okay, but are we going to
We'll use
have
phone
meetings?
calls. We'll have public meetings. We'll do the stakeholder meetings all over again.
Okay.
So we're going to use, well, frankly, every way we know how to
Okay.
communicate with our residents and businesses to get the word out. Try to hit that goal that you're not surprised at what's going to happen come January, February, that you are aware of the financial impacts before you receive a bill.
Okay. I mean, I see that. It's just I don't see public meetings in there. With stakeholders, yes, but I don't know how.
You were correct. Somehow we failed to put public meetings.
We don't see public meetings up there. We have lots of information, but I think sometimes, be it a coffee with council, or if it's just a hometown meeting at the library, if we could somehow make people feel comfortable about just asking the simple question that they may have, I think that goes a long way. Not everyone reads or does all of that stuff, but
Correct.
sometimes the personal touch will help. So, but again, I think staff has done a really good job. I think the key to this actually working and people understanding it is the next few months. And I know it's going to be a tremendous amount of work for Doug and his team, but the more effort we put into that and the more information we get out there, the less questions we'll have in January. So, but again, great job to everyone involved.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Barnett?
Thank you, Mayor. To the ordinance itself, I had a couple of questions and comments in reading through. I apologize, Dave, for not getting some of this to you earlier. I've been a little incommunicado with some internet challenges myself. There's a change made in the water billing section where we purposefully removed the word treasurer, I believe. And I'm wondering if that change ought to be continued through the balance of the document. It seems like it's purposefully changed to make it a little bit more umbrella and less specific. I'm just wondering about that. We also have a couple of places in both the stormwater and water section where we refer to mail notifications. But then at the very end, in sort of the penalty section, we talk about served via hand delivery or first class. Same thing in my mind, that ought to be, I'm envisioning a situation where we don't get as much engagement as we wish, and all of a sudden there's a lot of borderline chaos come January. And so I think we ought to be trying to be real clear and consistent with all these notification methods and things like that. There's also a question I have about the non-single family residential. This is 2566. Say all fractional ERUs be rounded up to the next whole ERU. I certainly can understand what that math means, but when we sort of define the section, the Tier 1 table in fractional ERUs, I'm wondering why we do that. it feels like inconsistent.
You're talking about non-single-family
Yeah,
residential?
the non-single-family residential, the last sentence there says all fractional ERUs are rounded up to the next whole ERU. But in most of the public stuff to this point, we've talked about 0.75 ERUs and 1 ERUs and 1.5 ERUs. I'm wondering if we should reconsider that or hear why exactly it is
Yeah,
that way.
the reason we did that is we tried to create the tiered system for single-family properties, which is the vast majority of properties in town, to create that so that we, frankly, would lower our administrative costs, streamline the process. In the non-single family, we can actually measure and bill the actual amount of ERUs, and so we tried to capture that concept.
So if we can, then why don't we bill it instead of rounding? If we can measure them and capture them, the non-single families, why don't we just go ahead and bill them at the actual measured ERU?
I think, yeah, we could do either one. We'll have to check and see how that rounding
Yeah.
affects the model
It
and
turns
our revenue
into,
projections.
10 employees to get it done, obviously, that's a
Yeah.
problem. But, and there's another section that concerns me. I've got challenges with several parts of this. Modifications to the parcel 2568. I'm wondering if there's a way that we could, I think we have in some of our other code requirements certain percentages. You know, if you're going to redo X percentage of your house or X percentage of your square footage, those trigger certain events. We say in there that parcel owner or tenant makes any modification to the parcel which changes the impervious area. I understand the point about measuring impervious area and using that as the vehicle by which we assess the costs. But that could be pretty radical. You know, a guy adds a little brick landing to his deck. He's technically changed any impervious area.
Right. So there's a practical nature to this clause too, and it has to do with what types of activities would affect the amount of impervious area on your property, and which of those things would require a building permit or a stormwater permit that we would know about anyway. The reality is that the vast majority of things that you could do to your property to change impervious area require a permit. Stormwater permits are required for any impervious area or structure of 100 square feet or greater, and any modifications to decks, patios, generally require a permit. So we tried to capture the fact that it's incumbent upon the customers to let us know. The practical reality is most of them will come through the permit process.
Should we say that, any modification that requires a permit process in other ways?
Well,
There
to
are
take
some-
a step further, I would just, not to jump in here, but I would just call it any material modification, and then just make that a defined
There you
term.
go.
And then in your definitions, define what a material modification is.
Yeah, and one of the things that Enzo reminds me of is a lot of this, you don't need a permit to take things out as well. So if you remove a pool, if you remove a patio, et cetera, you'd like to notify us, we'd like to hear about it, we can adjust your bill appropriately.
Although that's a self-motivating act right
Yes,
there.
it is.
You're not going to have to worry about
Changes.
hearing from those people.
Ideally, right. I had another part here, too.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Martin. This is workshop, right? Find my other note here. I'd like a little more definition, doesn't have to be this moment, but between now and next meeting, there was an answer in the council questions that had to do with the answer to the question in the Stormwater Credit Incentive Manual, Section 2.5, what types of records are they required to keep? Some of that answer in there made it sound to me like we would be, and maybe this is intended, much like some of our other permits, but people are going to be more likely required to engage professional services? Is that
Yes,
is that
absolutely yes. All of these facilities require design by a licensed engineer. So yes, they will have a professional on staff as part of their team to get these credits in the first place.
Is that, did I miss that in the manual about the credit applications or something? That people know if they want to make that application, they got to have? Okay.
Yes, it's in there. We made a couple modifications to the language to make it more clear based on some questions we had, but yes, it's in there now.
Okay. We also went through and changed a bunch of our activities in sort of collections, if you will, from this 45 days to 60 days, or 60 to 45 days. I don't like that just because I find myself constantly, from a business standpoint, in tight spots relative to that, and I'm not sure why we got off the 60. I guess I'd like to have people, you know, I'm just picturing this first
Sure.
year when people are dragging their feet, not sure what to do, aggravated and everything else, and we're shortening the clock on them. That sounds rough to me.
Yeah, the story behind that is anytime you go and start talking about changes to your current practice, you learn more about your current practices. And what we found is the way we operate is really more conducive to 45-day increments rather than 60-day increments. And so we took that opportunity to model it in that fashion. We could take a look at a 60-day notification process. I think the pertinent part of this is we really do operate in the facilitate, not regulate mode, which means that what we're really trying to do is work with our residents and businesses to make sure they are aware and make sure they make the payments. And so if somebody has extenuating circumstances, we like to work with them on timelines, et cetera. So we can take a look at that, but that is why it's built on a 45-day system.
That's a good reason. I'm glad we do try and work through that. And that's a nice segue to another question I had, which was, again, in 2569, the failure of the Oversight Committee to render a decision within 35 days shall be deemed a decision denying the appeal. That also just bothers me in principle. Yeah, obviously, we're going to be trying to work with people and try and facilitate, not regulate. I'm envisioning, maybe it's not fair, but I'm envisioning this worst-case scenario of the first 6 months of this, and there being lots of work done, and I'd hate to think that if we just didn't schedule a meeting or come to a decision that was a de facto decision. That bothers me.
Yeah, this is language we've taken from other parts of the code similar to zoning board of appeals processes. And the way we operate is that if there's some sort of delay on the village's part on getting it on an agenda item, of course we don't enforce that. It's only if it's considered and they purposely aren't making a decision on it. That's when we would render that decision. Remember also that these boards that are hearing it, in this case Stormwater Floodplain Oversight Committee, if there's a reason they'd like more time, then they simply continue it, and that does not count towards failure to make a decision in that time frame.
Okay. All right. Let's make sure that gets real clear in the minutes, at least of this meeting. All right. And then the last thing, Mayor, just some commentary. For those that have been following this debate, they've heard some concern that I have about this tax deductibility, and that is still weighing heavily on me. I know we made some changes last time around that I think were improvements. I know there's some village analysis of the the tax deductibility and the impact of it on a typical homeowner or property owner. But that feels to me still like a real challenge, in that we're, I think, leaving, at least in theory, leaving a ton of Village of Downers Grove income on the table, so to speak, for federally mandated programs. Much of what we're doing is mandated by the federal government, and if you take that tax deductibility and put it in play, it's on $6.5 million, it's $1.3 million, something like that. So I'm still trying to get my head square on this thing, but appreciate all the work that's been done thus far.
Thanks, Commissioner. I had a few comments on language on the ordinance and the manual itself, and I've already shared that with the village manager, but just real quickly, so everyone knows what they are, there was some minor language with respect to some definitional items that I thought would make things more clear, and also comments with respect to the indemnification provisions. I won't bore everybody with the details on that, but to strengthen them and make them in the better interests of the community and the village, to make the overall engine work the way it's supposed to. And with respect to the process that's required in order to maintain one's credit, there is a documentation and submission process that's involved, and particularly in the beginning, I think we ought to have a little bit more flexibility with respect to that, because it's going to be something very new. People aren't used to doing that, and we ought to give them sufficient notice and reminders in terms of what is submitted, so that the idea is to encourage that behavior, not to make it so difficult to maintain that we risk having gotchas where some photograph isn't sent in on the exact right day. And I think we can make some of those adjustments, which leads to a broader question. But before I get to that, I just want to pick up on something Commissioner Barnett said, and that is that the changes with respect to the 60 to 45 days actually affect the water bill and everything on it. So it's both this and the water billing as well, which is something that everyone ought to understand. It's not
That's correct.
unique to the stormwater utility. These are changes be made to the whole water billing system. So whether utility was here or not, those changes are being suggested as part of the 60 to 45 day that Commissioner Barnett mentioned. Just a couple observations, and I'll open up for comment from the audience, and then any further comment from the council. Clearly, this is absolutely consistent with the policy direction that was given in terms of going forward with putting this together. We sort of decided that we needed a car and we wanted to build a car, but the details had not been hashed out as to what it would look like and where things would go and how they would work. And now we're seeing the construction of the actual vehicle, which, as if you were building a real car, would take a fair amount of design and engineering and blood, sweat, and tears. And I think we're seeing all that reflected in the work that has been done by staff in a remarkably short period of time, as my colleagues have noted. The reality is that we've all agreed that something must be done. We need a sustainable, equitable system for funding our ongoing stormwater infrastructure and maintenance obligations. And there are other ways of funding this, but they are, at least in my opinion, less equitable and less sustainable in some respects. And this is the path that we have chosen, at least to bring it to this stage. And I'm certainly hopeful and buoyant that we continue down this path, because it is a very important policy direction for a very important funding issue in this community that has to be addressed. And I'd like to think that we are, in fact, addressing it. That said, this is something very new, and there's certainly little experience with it locally. We're on the leading edge here, at least in our neck of the woods, and there will have to be some adjustments, I'm sure, as time goes on, as this is put into practice, and thus the need for some flexibility and probably earlier assessment than we would make with other programs, because few people have experience with this, much less us. And there may be tweaks that have to be made, and there will likely be bumps down the road. And I think, what was the term, borderline chaos? I guarantee you, mark my words, that when the first round of bills go out reflecting this line item on the water bill, I don't know if it'll be borderline chaos, but there'll be something, because that's when we'll need the public meetings, because no matter what we do in advance, I don't think there's any way possible to completely avoid what will be the first time someone opens up their mail and, what's this? It doesn't matter if we've been talking about it for 10 years, we'll have that element to it. So there will be bumps, there will be tweaks, and there will be a need for some flexibility. But I think the broader policy parameters are what are absolutely critical to maintaining this going forward. So let me stop and open it up for any comments, questions from any members of the audience, and then we'll come back to any other questions, comments, or thoughts of the day from the Village Council. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. Tom Lecren, 545 Chicago Avenue. Just a couple of nitpick things in the ordinance. Under 25.71 accounts, we need to be politically correct in this section, if we are in the other ones, because it says, talks about the village treasurer, and then it says at regular annual intervals, he shall cause. Probably should be he/she.
Or treasurer.
And I think Dave mentioned it, but it's not mentioned in the ordinance. It just refers to the oversight committee, and my presumption is that's the stormwater and floodplain oversight committee. That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's in the definitions.
I think just from my own point of view, one of the things to be considered in telling people, informing what's going on, is one of the things is all of these charts have showed a monthly charge, and they're going to get it bi-monthly or every 2 months, so it's going to be double that. We need, so that they're not surprised when it pops up. Well, but you said it was going to be $10, and now it's 20. So
that's probably not a bad idea.
We're not going to multiply it by 2.
So when we launch the public engagement, one of the first things we're going to do is start expressing the numbers in terms of how they will actually be presented on their bi-monthly bills, just like we do on the water portion of the utility bills. So you'll see that switch coming in the public messaging.
Excellent.
I'd actually envisioned a little video piece that we can do where you do a little skit where someone is sitting around their kitchen table and they open up this bill and they see it and they have the reaction that we're all expecting they will actually have and then immediately we can get into what they're going to receive, what's on it, what it represents, and what the history is. I don't know, I can see Doug in sort of some of those Captain Utility costumes bursting in and explaining everything.
We will also film the opening of the tax bill, which will go down as well, but you won't get that for a few months.
No, well, no one will watch that one. That one has as many hits as the other one. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Bill Roble, 7800 Queens Court in Downers Grove. Going through the sheets here, I noticed that they mentioned in bill paying and payments, residents of the south side of the village will receive their first stormwater bill on January 2nd, and then residents on the north side will receive their first water bill on February 1st. First thing comes to my mind, since I live on the far south side, why am I privileged to pay my another month stormwater than my friends on the north side? Could someone answer that for me?
Yes, of course. First of all, everybody in the village of Downers Grove pays for just the 1 year during the 1 year period. So nobody's paying more or less, nobody's making more payments in a year or fewer payments in a year. It's all just for 1 year. The reason we use that is our current water billing structure, where we've divided the town into 2 portions. It eases administration and keeps costs down, and that is the current system we use. And since we're using the water billing system for the new utility bills, we will continue with that split billing process.
But I won't pay any more than my north side people.
I will make sure.
In a calendar year.
That's correct.
No.
Nope.
You will not.
Okay, because I'd come after you.
Well, I know you were immediately suspicious when Commissioner Durkin wasn't here that there was some sort of plot on the south side, but and lay that rumor to rest once and for all.
Secondly, since you're incorporating it with the water bill, it was mentioned by one of the commissioners that you were going to have another position on the village staff to administrate this stormwater utility tax fee, and don't we already have a person who administrates the water billing process, or would it be prudent to contract it out if it's not already contracted out for the water bills? I'm fishing here. I'm not too sure what I'm
I think I know what the question is, and Mr. Fieldman is ready to answer it.
A couple of things. The position of stormwater administrator already exists and is already required under the county ordinance, county stormwater ordinance. That position is filled, and filled very well by Karen Dalton-Lang, who's been on our staff for several months now. We do try to administer the program with the least amount of cost and overhead. This system will include the hiring of a part-time GIS system administrator, which will help with the database and billing and answering questions. The people who run the current water billing system will be trained as well in stormwater questions, and so we are getting that economy of scale and efficiency that Mr. Roble is looking for. So the stormwater administrator position is required already, is already here, and the incremental position is really the GIS part-time position, which is permanent. And then with the program launch, we will use either existing part-time employees or augment with contractual employees to make sure we can answer all the questions that we know we will get when we launch the program.
And again, I would imagine, not to speak out of turn, but I would imagine that after we get some experience with this program under our belts, we could then reassess what the administrative support requirements are for the program.
Absolutely.
Can you, I was trying to understand, I thought I heard you say that the position of stormwater administrator is required by law?
Correct.
County.
State law?
County law.
County ordinance.
County ordinance. Okay, thank you.
That's in order for us to be a full waiver community. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the stormwater utility ordinance? Any final thoughts, Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor.
Not final thoughts, final for tonight, not final.
Final, yeah, okay. Since we were talking about surprises and gotchas up here, how soon before January will we know for everybody what tier they're going to be? All that billing stuff has to be ready before the bills go out in January.
Correct.
So what's the lead time for being ready on that?
We knew a couple weeks ago. So we already have built the database and the billing systems. And while we are not ready to generate and send bills, we do have everybody's information about impervious area. So you can start right now by clicking on Stormwater Utility section on our webpage email us your address, and we will send you all the information about your tier, your bill, and your property tax reduction.
Which brings up this, that's an excellent, I like that answer, that's ready to go. Any possibility of sending out a dummy bill, let's say in the November, December timeframe with the balance of zero, just as a warning so that we know who we're hitting and...
So we have managed chaos.
I think there's an advantage both to the public and maybe to staff as well, so that, if things are going out to the wrong people, maybe there's some fixes we can do ahead of time. Just wondering if there's a way we can anticipate...
Well, it's really just a
getting
change
zero
of put it on
bill.
the water bill.
It's a little bit more than that, because the water billing system has a hard time deciding whether it's actually active or not, and there are some practical difficulties in setting up a system and then telling it to run all zeros instead. However, what we're going to do is we're going to send notice to the owners of vacant parcels to let them know that they will now be receiving a utility bill. Remember, the vacant parcels are likely not to be on our water system. So we will let them know, and we'll put in the information in there. And we will put example bills throughout all of our communications, including direct mails to selected customers. So while we won't send an example bill or an actual bill with a zero ahead of time, we will get out example bills and notify as many people as we can.
And we couldn't add a tier on there. Let them know what tier they're on the samples.
We have not finalized the direct mailing component. We have finalized the fact that we think the concept of an actual bill zeroed out in advance is not practical from an administrative standpoint.
But putting a tier on there would be the same thing as trying to do the zero.
Yeah, because yes.
Well, it's worth asking anyway.
But I want to make clear, though, the intent of doing those things we will hit in a variety of ways.
Okay. That's all I got.
Commissioner Chanel.
For those of us who are challenged at times, I just actually did the little link and got an error message, which says, could not, asking to put your address in. It says, could not perform this operation because the default mail client is not properly installed. Do you know what that means?
No, I do not.
I'm sure you do.
But we have people on staff to do so.
I'm sure they do, but that's what comes up when you press it. So just so it can be fixed before other people press it.
It's being looked at by top men.
Top men.
Was that
or women.
the website?
So, huh?
Was that directly from the website?
Well, I went on, it says, want to know what your fee and or tax reduction will be. So I figured, what the heck, over here, I'll press the button. And then I got Sarah's message.
And I think that's what...
That's up and running today. There might be an issue we'll check into.
I just wanted to let you know.
As of yesterday, we were receiving and responding to those emails, so we'll
Well, I
check
probably
out.
knew I was doing it.
Undoubtedly.
This is a message from Maryland.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted you to know in case some other resident got the message.
Commissioner Rankin.
I forgot a few questions, and these aren't crucial, but I was just wondering for the education credit and the partnership credit, do they have to submit or pay the $300 application fee? Or not?
Yes, and in fact, though, they will get a face-to-face meeting. Since there are so few of them, we'll meet with them and walk them through that. So for their fee, they'll get the actual face-to-face meeting, and we'll help them fill out that application.
Okay. And you and I had discussed the issues with landlords. Is there any database of landlords, and can you send some sort of letter to those people explaining how the water bill and the stormwater bill will be combined? And
We do have the list of property owners in town, and we do have a list of current water bill customers, and sometimes they are not the same. So all those exist, and we will do our best to communicate to a variety of stakeholders throughout this 6 or 7 month process.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions, comments at this stage from members of the council? All right, very good.
Just one final note, Mayor and Council. You are used to seeing and interacting with many department heads, and you know that we work on interdepartmental teams. What you don't often see are the people who do the day-to-day work, come up with the big ideas, and see those ideas through to fruition. And I'm just going to rattle off several of the players and key contributors to creating this program, which was really a Herculean effort. Our team was led by Stan Balicki, Karen Dalton Lang, David Rao, Phyllis Wahlberg, Janice Barwald, Jeff O'Brien, Janine Cerulli, Carol Hogan, Robin Leahy, Dawn Didier, and Karen Robbins. And there are many, many more. But I really want to express to the community and to the council how fortunate we are to have such incredibly gifted and dedicated staff members. It makes all of us look really good. I wanted to pass that thanks on publicly.
Well, thank you for doing that, and our sincere gratitude and appreciation for all that effort to each and every one of them as well. I think we all fully recognize, given the long history of this, is what's involved, and it's particularly when you're doing something completely different.
Yes.
This takes a lot of work and a lot of thought and a lot of hard work, and I can only imagine the whiteboard discussions that took place late at night in conference rooms to get all this right, so thank you.
Absolutely. The next item on our first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance establishing special service area number 4 for the Green Acres subdivision. You may recall this is related to a recent re-subdivision of this property. Tom Dabereiner is here to present backup information on this item.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I know you're used to looking up at a screen when I walk up to the podium, but do not have a PowerPoint on this tonight.
So we can just focus on you.
Really? There's an ordinance that has been prepared establishing special service area number 4 for the Green Acres subdivision. We're looking for approval on August 21st in the active agenda. The Green Acres subdivision, as David mentioned, is located on the west side of Fairview Avenue, just north of 66th Street. It was originally approved in 2004. Just a few months ago in April, the village approved re-subdivision of several lots to modify the detention area and create a new buildable lot. That re-subdivision included establishment of a homeowners association to maintain the common areas, which includes the detention area and other areas as well. The special service area number 4, again, would serve as a safeguard in the event that the Green Acres Homeowners Association cannot or does not maintain the detention area for the subdivision. The village would propose a maximum annual rate not to exceed 3% of the property's equalized assessed value as the tax levy. That 3% is based on a couple things. First of all, it is the maximum amount that can be charged in this particular situation. And it does relate to what we estimate the cost that could occur, a maximum cost that could occur should maintenance not occur to the detention area. To establish the SSA, the village must first of all approve an ordinance proposing the establishment of the SSA. That's what we're talking about tonight. Then secondly, there would be a public hearing that would be held after, of course, proper notice in newspaper. That's a 15-day notice. There would be notices also mailed to the property owners within the SSA. In this case, it would be fairly simple because we're talking about primarily just one home or one property owner, and that's Greenscape Builders. And then after a 60-day objection period, during which if 51% of the property owners or electors residing within the boundaries of the proposed SSA, if they would file an objection, then the special service area could not be created. Being that it's Greenscape Homes and they have asked for this, it's unlikely that 51% of Greenscape Homes would object. I would be, staff obviously is recommending this as well. Be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have. And with that, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dabereiner. Let's start with the audience first on this one. Are there any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to this item 7B as in boy on our discussion agenda? Hearing none. Questions or comments from any members of the council? Wow, none.
Okay. I'm going without a PowerPoint every week now.
They were submitted prior to this.
The darn visuals that were doing you in.
No, there were a lot of good questions submitted prior to the meeting and are available online. So-
Yes, they are.
Yes, that is true. Well noted, Commissioner, thank you.
The next three items actually deal with stormwater and drainage improvements. All will be presented by Director Nan Newland. The first is a award of contract for improvements at Fire Station Number 3.
Thank you, Dave.
Good evening.
Good evening. I have the pleasure of presenting two drainage projects bid awards for you tonight that will directly and cost-effectively make improvements in their area that will reduce flooding. The first project, as Dave said, is at Fire Station 3, and it's not, like the title says, it kind of sounds like it's to improve drainage at Fire Station 3, but it's actually to improve drainage within this neighborhood, which is about a 5-acre tributary area that drains from the south through Fire Station 3 and then between two homes to the north there and has caused flooding in the past. We are going to be removing and reconfiguring part of the parking lot at Fire Station 3, which will facilitate this project, which will reduce runoff, which will promote infiltration of the runoff into the ground, and will improve water quality through the construction of a bioswale where we are removing the pavement. And I think we have an exhibit that shows roughly what this project will look like. No, I'm sorry, we didn't include it. There's a bioswale that will be running north and south along the west side of the parking area that we're removing the pavement. This parking lot at Fire Station 3 was originally designed larger than most of our fire stations in order to accommodate regional training for the fire department. And this training is no longer done at this facility with the construction of Fire Station 2. So we have the ability to remove some paved area, which is in a pretty distressed state, which we would have had to spend resources on anyway. We'll be able to remove it and to replace it with this bioswale. We have been talking about this project for about 2 years now. We initially submitted for 2 different grants. We did receive grant funding from DuPage County, which helped us with the design of the project, and with some leftover money, we're going to be able to help with the construction. We had also submitted for a state grant through the Illinois Emergency Management Agency. We'd been led to believe from discussions with their staff that we would be successful in getting that money. We've been waiting for, like I said, about 1.5 years now for that to come through. And because we think this project is so beneficial to the neighborhood and cost effective, we are proposing that the remainder of the funding be paid for out of the stormwater fund. We did go out for bid. We received 5 bids, and the low bidder was V3 Construction Group at a cost of $103,030. This contractor completed the Maple and Carpenter Storm Sewer Replacement Project and St. Joseph Creek dredging, and they will be beginning the Grove Street permeable paver reconstruction within the next month as well. They have been doing good work for the village, and we recommend approval of the contract to V3, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Terrific, thank you. Any questions? Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to this item? There's another meeting going on in the back. Any questions or comments from members of the village council with respect to this item? Commissioner Schnell.
I have one, and I do apologize for not asking this before. There is a storm drain that over the time has always clogs up and has created a flooding problem for the one house in particular. Is this going to, I guess, where in relationship to all this project is that storm drain? Is this going to prevent that storm drain from clogging?
Yes. The storm drain is on the very north end of that area there.
Okay.
We're going to be installing a second inlet, and we're going to be constructing an overflow structure so that it's kind of like an elevated beehive. So when the water, if it was to get filled in with vegetation, it would be able to overflow and get into the structure.
Okay. So that should eliminate the residents or firemen going out and having to clean it during a heavy rainstorm.
Yes.
Okay.
And
great.
we're also looking, like I said, to slow down the water. Instead of running over the pavement, it'll be going through the bioswale. So the water should be reaching the inlet slower, and there should be less water as well.
Okay.
So those 3 things together should greatly reduce the overflow we experienced in the past.
How deep is the swale, just out of curiosity?
I think it's probably 2 to 3 feet deep at the deepest area.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm sure the residents that have had the problem will appreciate the fact that this is being done, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Newstead.
Just a quick operational question. Will the fire department vehicles still be able to drive around the station and then back into the apparatus bay, or do they have to go around and do it on 39th Street in Highland?
We did work with them and ran the turn models for their largest vehicle, and they're able to maneuver the site.
Great. That's all I have.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Very good. Next item, please. 7D.
This is actually, I'm going to present for item D and E, which are related to the same project. We have experienced flooding over the last couple of years on high rainfall events in the vicinity of Wisconsin and Janes, which is in the Butterfield Industrial Park, and specifically affects the property that is owned by ServiceMaster. This contract, we're recommending the award of a bid to Austin Tyler LLC of Elwood, Illinois, in the amount of $279,505.78. That's the award of bid. And the second item is a resolution prepared to authorize execution of an agreement, with CRAAP LLC, which is also known as ServiceMaster, for work which will be occurring on their property that they will be paying for as part of this contract. The issue is that there's undersized storm sewers and an inadequate overland flow route. So when the storm sewers reach their capacity and start to overland flow to the north from this intersection, the flow path is also inadequate. And so it results in structural flooding of the building at this property. And the project involves the installation of a larger storm sewer system for the intersection of Wisconsin and Janes, and an improvement of this overland flow path through the property at 2400 Wisconsin, which will significantly decrease the frequency of street and structural flooding. Not only does the structure flood, but during high rain events, the street becomes impassable at the intersection. The recommended project includes an alternate bid, which is primarily work within the public right-of-way, which is the village portion of the property, as well as an alternate bid item, which includes a couple of different options. Some of them were grading on ServiceMaster's site, and the other option was to do some grinding of their parking lot and some regrading of the parking lot. And they're choosing to do the second option, which is alternate B. They have already signed this agreement and paid the village their portion of the cost, and that's what is included in the attached agreement under item E tonight. We did advertise for bids, and on July 18th, we received 8 bids. The low bidder is Austin Tyler LLC, who is currently performing the reconstruction of the streets and the water mains in Nottingham, and staff believes they're performing very well and are recommending award of this contract to Austin Tyler LLC, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on either of these items from any members of the audience? Just making sure you're all paying attention. Any questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to either of these two items? Hearing none. Thank you very much for the presentation.
And the final item,
to 8F,
which is an ordinance amending general penalties for ordinance violations, and this will be presented by our village attorney, Enzo.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dave. This ordinance, the proposed ordinance amends the municipal code in order to comply with the recently enacted Supreme Court rules concerning prosecutions of ordinance violations. We've never had Supreme Court rules concerning ordinance violations before, so this is something new. Basically, this ordinance increases some amounts for traffic offenses, for bail amounts for traffic offenses, and also includes certain, for sentencing of ordinance violations, certain requirements for those. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments with respect to the changes required by the Illinois Supreme Court rules from members of the audience? Any questions or comments from members of the village council? In short, we're changing our ordinance to comply with the law.
Basically.
Understood.
Catching on to us.
Wow, all
Municipal
right.
prosecutions.
Fancy that. Well, thank you.
And that ends our first reading tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. And that ends our first reading, as you mentioned, brings us to item 9 on our agenda, the mayor's report. I have one item, and this is, we're now coming full cycle with respect to the reports that stemmed from the extreme weather events that we experienced last summer. Haven't had any of those in Downers Grove so far this summer, and I hope we don't, although I think some people would like to have the rain that came with some of those storms, but maybe not the violence that did. But a year ago, due to the extraordinary power outages that occurred after those storms, the whole issue of the reliability of the electrical distribution service in Downers Grove was called into question, and we had a town hall meeting with a number of senior executives with Commonwealth Edison to address those issues, and we've been reporting on the efforts largely of staff, exclusively of staff, to really hold ComEd to the fire in terms of making good on the things that they said they would do to try to enhance the reliability of electrical service here in Downers Grove. And we've made considerable progress on that, but we're not finished. In fact, the Chamber of Commerce has mentioned on multiple occasions that wouldn't it be nice to have a similar town hall meeting that invited businesses to attend, because they are obviously also greatly impacted by these outages in addition to our residents. So we have such a town hall meeting scheduled again. So this will be I always get thrown off by this. Is it the second annual or it's the first annual? Because you have to have two to be annual. Anyway, we're going to call it the second annual town hall meeting with ComEd. It will be held on Thursday, September 20th at 7 o'clock p.m. in the lower level meeting room at the Park District Recreation Center on Belmont Avenue. Residents and businesses are invited to attend, to speak with and interact with ComEd officials about concerns that they may have with electricity reliability. Also, the meeting will provide residents and businesses with a chance to learn more about future ComEd upgrades, including the smart grid project that we heard so much about last year and in the beginning of this year. So this is once again an opportunity to identify our issues, and I know we'll have our own position paper in advance, I'm sure, and we'll have a new list of items that we would like to see them address, and this will give us an opportunity for everyone to interact on that and to continue to, well, I don't want to say pressure, but to continue to encourage and urge ComEd to make improvements with all deliberate speed. So we're looking forward to that, and thank you again to everyone on staff for setting that up, because this has truly been an ongoing project. It's not one of the 12, but it's sort of been woven into the fabric of responsibilities, but obviously it's very important for all our stakeholders. Now, that's all I have on the mayor's report. That will bring us to item 10 on the agenda, manager's report. Mr. Fieldman.
Coffee with the council this Saturday, 9 a.m. at the Main Street train station. Please join us.
Yes, and we have a special guest, which we'll talk about in a minute.
That's all, Mayor.
Village Attorney report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. 3 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance adopting a stormwater utility ordinance and amending water utility provisions. Second is an ordinance amending general penalties for ordinance violations, penalties for miscellaneous offenses, and general sentencing for ordinance violations. And the third is an ordinance proposing the establishment of a special service area number 4 in the village of Downers Grove and providing for a public hearing and other procedures in connection therewith.
Terrific. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 12, council member reports and new business. Commissioner Barnett?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Commissioner Schnell?
Just one thing, when I was at Every Day's Sunday 20th celebration yesterday, I was talking to some of our firefighters, and their international local 3234 is supporting, along with Good Samaritan Hospital, a Pink Heels tour, and they asked if I would bring some information to the rest of the council. So everyone has this brochure or little flyer in their basket. We are going to be putting, I think, some of the information online, or at least have it available to our residents at the front desk. It is a tour supporting women in their fight against all types of cancers. It is going to be held Thursday, August the 23rd from 4 to 6 p.m. at Advent Good Samaritan Hospital parking lot adjacent to the emergency department. It is the ability to take some photos with a parade of pink fire trucks. So if you have kids who like fire trucks, it's something very unique. And then any cancer survivors who come are asked to sign a message of inspiration and support and hope for other women who might be fighting cancers too. So it's just a great event, and I would encourage people to come. And I want to thank the fire department and their specifically their union for their support of this type of endeavor over the years, because I know this has been something that they've kind of been doing for a long, long time, and I salute them for doing it. So thank you.
Thank you. Ditto. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Neustadt.
I have no report, Mayor.
Commissioner Rankin.
I have a question. I didn't get your attention before. For the ComEd meeting, are we going to send an email to all the people that came last year that had issues? I think that would be good, because if they're not resolved, maybe they can come and address them again. And by the way, I saw Mr. Toller, remember Mr. Toller?
Yes.
I saw him at the grocery store, and his issues are not terrible anymore.
Well, we'll make sure to invite him then.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
And that's a standard that we aspire to meet, not terrible. Sorry about that.
I would just like to encourage everyone to sign up for the Grove Foundation golf outing. It is on September 8th, which is a Saturday. It's at the Downers Grove Park District Golf Course. The information to register is on the Grove Foundation website, which is www.thegrovefoundation.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
I have no report, Mayor.
Very good. I have just a few things real quickly. Commissioner Schnell's already mentioned the Pink Heels Tour, so thank you for bringing that up. I'll first pick up with what I alluded to a moment ago. We have a special guest that is going to be joining us after Coffee with the Council this Saturday, August 18th. We will have Coffee with the Council at the Downtown Farmers Market from 9 to 10 a.m. And then immediately thereafter, Illinois State Treasurer Dan Rutherford will be here from, I believe, 10 o'clock to 11, but if I know him, then maybe later than that. So he will be joining us at our space there at the Farmers Market after our Coffee with the Council, primarily to bring and promote his iCash program to Downers Grove. This was formerly known as Cash Dash, but iCash is much more hip and 21st century. You can look up information about it if you just punch in iCash Illinois on your handy-dandy search tool and find out about it, but it's a way to connect residents with unclaimed property. So you may have money out there and not already know it. So this is an opportunity to find out more about the program, put in your information into the database, and who knows, you might even find out that you may already be a millionaire. Now, maybe not a millionaire, but you might have a couple $100 in a store you might pick up. But it's worth finding out about it, and of course, meeting the treasurer, Dan Rutherford, would be also an added bonus. So if the Village Council isn't enough of a draw for you on a Saturday morning to come down to Farmers Market, the treasurer, Dan Rutherford, very well might be. So we look forward to that as well. And of course, come for Coffee with the Council, which is your opportunity to informally raise any issues you may have with members of the Village Council. Number two, I want to just congratulate very quickly the Downers Grove Lions Club for putting on another very successful new teachers luncheon. It is a very long-running program that they put on to acknowledge existing educators in our community and welcome new ones to their various new positions. And I know Commissioner Schnell was there, as Commissioner Neustadt and Commissioner Rankin were able to join us, as well as members of our staff, including Marcia Giesler and Village Manager Fieldman and Director of All Things Communication, Doug Kozlowski. So the village obviously very much appreciates the quality of education in our community, because it's one of the things that makes Downers Grove great. So I want to congratulate and thank the Lions for doing that once again and for including us, because boy, that was a really good lunch. I almost had to go home and take a nap after that. It's food coma. Last, and on a far more serious note, I just want to say that the Village of Downers Grove and the Village Council in particular is keeping Lombard President Bill Mueller in our thoughts and prayers. As some of you may know, President Mueller is in the hospital with pretty serious condition, which has been identified as West Nile virus. And President Mueller has had some health issues in the past, and so we hope that he pulls through this one as well, and our hearts and thoughts and prayers are with him and our neighbors in Lombard. And with that, I have nothing further, so I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Schnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Neustadt? Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye.